Uh, Namaste. Uh, we know that the CCP Congress has concluded and Xi Jinping will be the president for the third term. The global media and other countries were intently watching the proceedings to understand China's agenda, motives, and clues on what it might do next with respect to Taiwan, the US, South China Sea, its neighbors, etc. And at the same time, there have been reports of protests across China over the banking crisis, COVID policy against Xi Jinping himself. So, to make sense of all this and Xi's third term and the CCP Congress, we are fortunate to have Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Welcome, Dr. Sriparna.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vedar.
Yeah. So I just like to start with a mood question. The CCP Congress, the kind of interest it generated this time, has it always been that way?
No, the earlier congresses have also, of course, taken place, and this is the 20th Party Congress.
Yeah.
But given the fact that China has become much more powerful and aggressive with implications for, the future of international relations, this time's Congress is being much more closely watched out for. Also, Xi Jinping is going to, go in for his third term.
Right.
COVID-19 has happened, which never happened earlier in this world. Like a pandemic of this scale never happened. There have been policies within China which have produced some discontent. Even outside, global economies have come down crashing, and public health systems have come down crashing.
True.
How is Xi Jinping going to address all of these issues domestically and internationally? These are important questions which have repercussions for the entire world, which is why this time it's being much more watched out for.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. So, that brings me to the first real question, which is there on everybody's mind. So, what would Xi Jinping's third term mean for the Communist Party of China, Chinese themselves, and world in general, and particularly the neighborhood?
Right. So, as I said, like it or not, China is an important player, and its policies are affecting the entire globe in very different ways. Most of it has been a very negative sort of implication for the world, be it, the trade war which China has with the US, which has been on for quite some time now, or, China's lack of accountability for COVID-19 virus. China's increasing incursions into India's borders, or even in the South China Sea, its threats to Taiwan. So a lot of things have been happening, which is why clearly there are implications for the world. Now, because it's a globalized world, I'll just give you one example. We are living in a world in which we rely on multinational corporations. Thousands of MNCs have invested trillions of dollars in China. Now, Xi Jinping has been trying to pursue his Made in China 2025 and something which he calls dual circulation, so that China can reduce economic and technological dependence on the West while the US seeks to decouple from the Chinese economy. So this is something, MNCs, how will they get affected? And MNCs are multinational corporations. So something which happens in China, any policy change, that is going to have repercussions for MNCs. And we as consumers, global consumers, are definitely going to feel the impact. Now, three main things are going to happen at this 20th Party Congress. Xi Jinping, the current General Secretary of the CCP, will read out his work report and talk about the achievements China has made in the last 5 years. He'll talk about the guiding principles for the next years, changes to the CCP constitution, and there are speculations that Xi will be anointed as party chairman, something which has, which was sought to be ended after Mao Zedong's demise. So these are the three things which will happen, and these will have implications for the world. If there's a more aggressive China, as has been the general trend, it will mean more military clashes, border disputes, trade disputes, and more protectionism, amongst a host of other issues. Now, talking about the neighborhood, India cannot be missed out. On the opening day of the 20th National Congress of the 20th CPC, a clip of the June 15th, 2020 Galwan Valley clashes between the Indian Army and the PLA was played out. And the the then Chinese military commander toasted as a hero of the ceremonial meeting in Beijing. So the Chinese military commander, he had also carried the 2022 Winter Olympics Games torch in Beijing.
Right, right.
Question here is, why was it done? It was done to flaunt the military prowess of the nationalistic, hyper-nationalistic People's Liberation Army, and it deliberately highlighted North Korea as the principal adversary of China. Beijing has tried to project the Galwan Valley clash as a victory of the PLA, as it claimed to have lost only 4 men as against 20
Right.
soldiers
Yes.
of the Indian Army.
Right.
Based on
Yeah.
intercepts of helicopter evacuations, we know that the Chinese army lost
Yes.
anywhere between 43 to 67 men. In a speech that followed this battle clip, which was played, a jingoistic Xi Jinping focused on his continued efforts to make China more militarily and economically powerful with the capacity and capability to challenge the West led by the EU. He reiterated his desire to co opt democratically ruled Taiwan into China with or
Okay.
without force. So
Okay.
clearly, the 20 party has a lot of implications for the neighborhood, definitely for India and Taiwan.
Um, so, uh, when the other another thing which I read about, when reading about the proceedings of this Congress, was Xi Jinping's politics in command approach. So, can you kindly explain what does it mean and how is this different from the approaches of earlier Chinese presidents?
Right. So this politics and command approach was something which Mao Zedong had followed. And it was
Okay.
Mao's
Okay.
direct structural change in the society, in the polity. However, as history tells us, Mao's politics caused massive deaths and destruction in China, which is why after his demise, once Deng Xiaoping came into power, he took the decision that the correct path is not that of politics in command. It should be economics in command. And he had even
Okay.
abolished some shifts so that there is never again a centralization of power. Under
Mhm.
politics in command, there's a centralization of power.
Right.
But the policies that we are seeing under Xi Jinping are reminiscent of some of the policies under Mao Zedong. Xi Jinping, while talking about economic
Okay.
changes that the country needs, has also been cracking down upon tech giants, for example. Big tech
Mhm.
firms like Alibaba and Tencent are some of China's largest companies. They have supported the growth of the Chinese economy through innovation, driving up productivity and consumer spending.
Mhm.
Within less than a year, the Chinese firms are supposed to turn into non-profits.
Okay.
Um, is to move in something done under politics and command. And this is definitely going to huge repercussions. Rather than the consumer focused tech in which Alibaba, Tencent, another company, Meituan, and these companies excel in consumer focused tech.
Right.
Beijing right now wants more hard tech, such as semiconductors, new
Okay.
materials, new energy.
Yes.
The people can have their meals delivered 14% faster, or if it is 7% easier to hail a car. So he's more than happy to see capital steered away from those sectors and towards areas which he sees as providing the foundation for China's future, what he sees as China's future. So, Mao Zedong had also done this whole sort of thing that, let's focus on our own energies. And he had called nuclear weapons as paper tigers. And, well,
Right.
they did
Right.
get
Right.
the nuclear weapon ultimately. So, Xi Jinping's approach is very similar to Mao Zedong. And as opposed to Deng Xiaoping,
Mhm.
she has completely brought in politics in command. Deng Xiaoping had talked about four modernizations. And when he talked about four modernizations, which the Chinese economy needed in 1978, he also sent delegations to Europe and to the US to learn. But Xi's approach
Okay.
is completely different from that, more inward looking. So Xi clearly has a plan in mind. He wants to usher China into a future, but that's a future which he sees as fit for China. So this is his politics in command, wherein he is in power. He's the centralized authority, and he will not let market economics or demand and supply decide the future of China. He will
Right.
decide where demand and supply coincide. So It's really different from the so far.
Yeah, thank you. And so that shows that, I mean, at least for us outsiders, the CCP Congress and its president has been Z-centric. So that
Yes.
brings me to the next question. One thing which you know, I really think that the global media did not really cover are the protests within China. Ever since the Evergrande crisis, we saw there have been small banking crisis. Then there were protests over it, and then COVID zero COVID policy protests against that, and recently the posters and protests against Xi Jinping himself, and then the reports of protests in universities.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, did this have any impact on the Congress or the outcome of the Congress, or do you think there will be some impact in the near future? These protests.
Mhm. Mhm. See, these protests have been rare, but the ones that you talk about, these were definite voices of dissent, and these were heard in Beijing in the final run-up to the 20th Party Congress. Banners featuring defiant political messages and sharp criticism of Xi Jinping, the anger and in Beijing, in a dangerous expression of dissent. Just few days before the 20th Party Congress started, one banner said, "Let us strike from schools and from work and
Okay.
remove the dictatorial traitor Xi Jinping." Another banner said, "No COVID test, we want to eat. No restrictions, we want freedom. No lies, we want dignity. No COVID
Okay.
test, we want to eat. No restrictions, we want freedom. No lies, we want dignity. No cultural revolution, we want reform. No leaders, we want votes. By not being
Okay.
strict, we can." It was this huge. Um,
Okay.
Actually, since mid-September, a, a large number of petitioners and activists are trying to influence the government in some way, and they have been imprisoned or placed under house arrest throughout China. And a great deal of human rights attorneys have been intimidated, followed, and harassed. China's internet censors removed
Mhm.
virtually all access to reports of tests in Beijing, which involved banners announcing Xi Jinping and the country's COVID-19 policies. Beijing was on high alert just 3 days
Okay.
before the 20th Party Congress started, and armies of volunteers were deployed in every neighborhood in Beijing to report anything out of the ordinary. Parcels, they were also these armies were parceled out to subways, and commuters were subjected to additional security checks. In Hong Kong, where the
Okay.
semi
Yeah.
outspoken media used to so widely cover demonstrations in the mainland, no
Mhm.
leading newspaper reported the protests. Hong Kong media have been brought to heel by Beijing, and a
True.
recent survey by the city's media industry body showed that press is hitting a record low. So protests not new in China; they've taken place over decades, but they've been equally quickly suppressed. And this time's protests have not been any different. They've been stifled. So there is no way that Xi Jinping is going to let his continuance as president come
Mhm.
under any sort of scanner. So he's cracked down heavily. So sadly enough,
Okay.
the protests, I don't see them making a huge difference.
Oh, yeah. I mean, makes sense that that is being the tradition of CCP, and it won't be any different this time. But there are, I think some moments like this great translation movement, and few other people who have moved out of China, loose groups which are helping out with these translations. Uh, I
Mhm.
mean, are they? I mean, are they good source to follow, or I mean, it's just FIA kind of things. The great translation movement and uh, some
Mhm.
people who have moved out
Well,
of China.
they are definitely great sources because they've lived within the system. They understand it very well, and they've been persecuted, of course, which is why they had to move out. So
Mhm.
given the fact that they know the language, they understand the system, and they want freedom, something which the Western world, including India, uh, they talk more about. They have democratic aspirations the way we understand democracy.
Mhm.
So they're definitely a good source to follow, so that we can understand what exactly is happening in China, because otherwise China is an information black box. there is no way of finding out what exactly is happening inside. As you also
Right,
mentioned,
right.
even Hong Kong did not cover them. So how do we
Yes,
really know
exactly.
what's happening? So
Yeah. So what another next specifically the approach towards Taiwan, South China Sea, or countering the US, especially after the sanctions on semiconductors. Uh,
mhm,
what were the discussions within the CCP Congress? We have read something about its approach to China and all that. They have toned down and all that. This question is very relevant because just I think yesterday I read that the U.S. Pacific Fleet Commander made a comment that the U.S. fleet has to be ready. Either early 2023. If China invades Taiwan. So, what were the discussions within the Congress regarding China's approach to Taiwan, South China Sea, and countering the US? If you can kindly put light on that.
mhm, mhm, mhm. So, there's been a lot of intense nationalistic rhetoric, aggressive posturing, both at the domestic and external front, muscle flexing
Mhm.
on Taiwan and the disputed areas. And this newfound defiance of the existing order has found a lot of acceptance within China.
Okay.
Xi Jinping has what rejuvenation amidst the spread of the pandemic as well as the Ukraine crisis. And this is something that we see has followed even into Xi Jinping's address at the 20th Party Congress. She directed that the country should be prepared to effectively respond to grave, intricate international developments and a series of immense risks and challenges. So he called for a strategic initiative for China's complete reunification without
Mhm.
ruling out the use of force.
Mhm.
Interestingly, he suggests that China's issues must be dealt with by Chinese people in the light of the Chinese context. Now, this
Okay.
is in complete contrast to Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's position that issues of Taiwan should be decided by the Taiwanese. So she
Okay.
actually Xi Jinping painted a bleak external picture, a very
Okay.
a seizure mentality by stating that external attempts to blackmail, contain, blockade, and exert maximum pressure on China will be dealt with. So this there's a very assertive posturing, and this assertive posturing has been there with regards to the Senkaku Islands, with regards
Mhm.
to the South China Sea disputes, and aggressiveness on the India-China bordering
Okay.
areas. In his assertive stance, Xi Jinping suggested evolving mechanisms for
Mhm.
countering foreign sanctions, interference, and long-arm jurisdictions. And he said
Okay.
that our mechanisms for countering all of this will be strengthened. So
Okay.
clearly, these are all signs that it's just going to be more and more aggressive. One more significant takeaway from Xi's speech is on building a peaceful China through the support of the country's armed forces. Now, this is such a farce. Building a
Yes, it's a
peaceful China using country's
with
armed forces.
on board.
So, in his work report, he talked about the PLA's modernization to safeguard China's unity. So, this
Mhm.
has major implications for India as well as for the other countries. Xi's
Mhm.
speech had a specific mention of 73 times of security and protecting national security. So, this indicates unrelenting focus on the use of force, threat of use of force, enhancing
Mhm.
deterrence capability. India, Taiwan, and the South China Sea, Xi Jinping clearly has more aggressive plans than the ones we have seen so far.
So, specific question would be uh, uh, how wary should India be now that, if I can use the word like Z has grown stronger? You will be knowing better whether he's really growing stronger within the party or, but given his third term, how wary should India be in what kind of readiness, whether militarily or in terms of
Mhm.
bilateral ties? What kind of preparations should India make?
So, as very clear, even the party congress hasn't even ended, but that
Yeah,
Galwan
yeah.
clip was there are references to core interests. China is saying it will protect its sovereignty. Clearly, it has singled out India as an enemy, and no matter how much
Mm.
come and tell India that, oh, we are brothers in arms and let's talk about trade and let's talk about economic linkages,
Yes.
India should not really fall for it again. India needs to understand that all these years, why China has been stabbing us in the back again and again, we have been talking about cooperation and collaboration because our Vasudeva Kutumbakam sees the world as one family. But that is not applicable to China because we can only stand backstabbing to a certain extent. And as Dr. Jaishankar had also said, after Galwan, things really need to be recalibrated. After the 20th Party Congress, as we have already seen, things are going to get much more difficult for India. So we need to be
Okay.
prepared. And there are evolving front of battles which China will, unleash against India. For example, cyber warfare, China's influence operations. There's a lot of cyber fraud, using certain Chinese apps which are happening in India, and a
Right.
lot of people have been duped of money. So there
True.
is a need for India to understand that even the cyber front is a very important front, and common
Okay.
citizens like us are treated as victims or
Mm.
for targets.
Very serious. Yes.
Get in
Yes. Yes.
of us. So there's a need for us to create awareness among
Mm.
citizens. There is a need for maybe the NTRO to check wherein more and more cyber espionage attempts are coming in from. Um, Definitely, the Indian Army has been doing a great job at the boundaries
Okay.
protecting us. But maybe we need to think of an alternative strategy: hit before they can strike, because it's clear that another hit is going to take place very soon. So
Okay. Okay.
we need to be prepared at all fronts. That is how I see it.
Yeah. Uh, Thanks for that. And since you are also active on social media, this one trend which I've observed over the last 1 year, especially in run-up to the Congress, there have been increasingly, accounts or geopolitical experts across the globe, some in Europe and US, taking a pro-China stance. I mean, is this Chinese PR strategy? Recruiting such people. I mean, I see a lot of accounts which come on a timeline which are taking a blatantly pro-China stance, especially in terms of its relation with Russia, the war, the relationship with US. Uh, I mean, how is this? Is this a genuine, effort from these scholars, or is it China, trying to have its network?
So, in the simplest terms, this is China's influence. These are China's influence operations. China wants to present to the world that it is a friendly country which is willing to take on the position of the leader. But as we all know, Chinese actions have not been matching this rhetoric. So, what can China really do? It has tried
Okay.
through soft, talking about Chinese culture, chopsticks culture, Chinese opera, etc. Has that had an effect in the way that Hollywood films have had? No, not really. Has
Okay.
that had that sort
Right.
of impact the way burgers or McDonald's, things like that, or KFC has had on the rest of the world? It has not. So China's soft power also didn't match up to the US. So what does it
Okay.
do? Now it has started using what is known as sharp power, or
Okay.
using influence operations, wherein the United Front Works Department of the CPC actively reaches out to people and makes them influencers, influencing opinion in favor of China, which is why you will see they use a lot of bots to push out narratives about China. On Twitter, you might see visit a beautiful Chengdu. One
Okay.
second, Twitter is
Yes. Yes.
what which comes up this advertisement in English. So clearly there
Yes.
is a
Yes.
strategy. Second is, reaching out to people, influencing their opinions, be it through persuasive narratives or through the usage of money,
Okay.
and simply making them push out narratives which favor China. So as opposed to soft power, China is now using what is sharp power and is
Right.
utilizing influence strategies. This is happening even in India. But the thing is, the strategy is still a little bit more different than
Okay.
what is used in, say, Taiwan or in the US. Taiwan, because it has been a victim of this strategy from China for ages, they actively look into China's influence operations. And one resource is Doublethink, which is a think tank in Taiwan, which does excellent work about tracking China's influence operations in countries all across the globe. Um, Thankfully for India, it is not as deeply penetrated still. Because we've
Okay.
been cautious with regards to setting up Confucius institutes, etc. But this influence operation is huge. This is a huge study in itself, and these Twitter,
Yes,
or
yes,
what
yes.
these narratives
I,
that you see on
yeah.
social media, these are actually being done by the Chinese government. This is not a strange coincidence.
No, I think that's a separate issue, which I think we can talk about it separately. China's influence
Right.
operations, it Confucius institutes and all that. So, since we are running out of time, my final thing is: are there any clues about either in Xi's speech or throughout the Congress about the kind of legacy which Xi wishes to leave behind?
Mhm.
And does the party think that Xi is taking China on the path it intends to? No, yeah, there's talk of China overtaking the US by 2049 and its 100-year march and all that. So, what is your view on that?
So, see, Xi Jinping has already written himself into the constitution. His pet
Yeah.
project of the Belt Initiative is also part of the constitution. As I said earlier, there are speculations that Xi Jinping will now be Chairman Xi Jinping, the way Mao Zedong was Chairman Mao Zedong. And there are also
Okay.
talks that now there'll be Xi Jinping thought at par with Mao Zedong thought. His China dream, rejuvenation plans clearly
Mhm.
signal that he sees himself as the leader who can bring back China's lost glory, whatever that means.
Okay.
So China present a face which shows that China is willing to take on the position of the leader in the international system. And for this, they have been actively pushing out narratives. If you just look at the 2,296 delegates chosen for
Okay.
the Congress, you will see, that China's state-controlled media has been talking about how highly qualified they are, how ideologically and
Yes.
politically
Yes.
correct they are. And they said that, oh, the average age is 52.2 years, women constitute 26% of these delegates and ethnic minorities, etc.,
Mhm.
etc. What they comfortably
Yes.
did not point out that how members beyond the age of 68 can get selected to the
Okay.
Politburo Standing Committee, or how many women have actually made it to the Politburo Standing Committee. They comfortably didn't mention that, but there
Okay.
is a reason
Okay.
doing that. So,
Yeah.
does the CCP approve of the path that Xi Jinping is taking? Well, there are factions within the CCP, and each of them has their political calculation. But there are two
Okay.
things which have to be here. One, all factions equally want China to regain that lost glory. Their mechanisms to reach that lost glory, might be different, but the goal is still the same. Second, Xi Jinping's anti-corruption policies, or more specifically, the policy of catching tigers and flies, has rounded up people who have been critical of him. Several
Right.
high-profile party members like Chou Yongkang, Po Xilai, Sun Sai, Ling Chihua, all of them have been incarcerated. I want to just
Okay.
give examples of three people who got incarcerated in the month of September alone, just 1 month before the
Okay.
party congress. There was
Okay.
Chang Yongze, who is a former
Mhm.
Tibet official. He was indicted on graft charges just a few weeks before the 20th Party Congress. And Xinhua News Agency says Chang took advantage of his former positions and power to seek benefits from others. What benefits?
Okay. Mhm.
No clarity. Then there's Sun Yuanyang, who is a former senior political advisor of Northeast China's Liaoning province. He got expelled from the CCP over serious violations of discipline and laws. So this is what the country's top anti-graft agency announced. Then there was Sun Lichun, former Chinese Vice Minister of Public Security. He was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve for taking more than 646 million yuan
Okay.
of bribes, manipulating
Okay.
the stock market, and
Mhm.
illegally possessing firearms. So,
Mhm.
just three people. How did this exactly happen? So, there's no clarity, nothing. But the thing is that they had been critical of Xi Jinping. So, even though
Okay.
there are A, either they will fall in line, or B, Xi Jinping will make them fall in line. There were these rumors that, Li Keqiang might just emerge, and maybe he will
Yes.
be
Yes.
contesting against Xi Jinping. But
Yeah,
that's not
yeah.
really happening. Li
Okay.
Keqiang himself said
Incredible.
that, well, I'm going to step down. And before this actually the party congress took place, there have been preparations. Xi Jinping redoubled his efforts to bolster his image inside China. He used a powerful propaganda apparatus. He used it to portray himself
Yeah.
as the leader who made original contributions to Chinese communism.
Okay.
There was this 13th CCP Guangdong Provincial Congress, which
Okay.
took place in May, and it was we've been able to write a new chapter in the reform and development um, of the new era under complex and severe situations because of Xi Jinping. Then there was the
Yeah.
12th CCP committee of the Guangxi Chuang province, autonomous region rather. It was held in May again, and it emphasized that cadres have to support the leader, defend the leader, follow the leader. So clearly, even if there
Okay.
are factions, it is not going to topple Xi Jinping, and Xi Jinping has truly emerged as a pole of power within the CCP. Either
Okay.
people will fall in line themselves, or he will make them fall in line.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. A lot of things to talk about with respect to China, but overall, you have given a complete picture about the CCP Congress and Xi himself and the legacy we wishes to leave behind and his kind of approach and what it means for Taiwan US relationships and India in specific. So I think we have covered comprehensively about what CCP Congress means for India and the world. Thank you, Dr. Sriparna. And I know there are several issues to talk about with respect to China. I'm sure you'll talk to us again.
Definitely. It's always a pleasure talking to you. And
Yeah,
I love being on Bad World. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thanks once
yeah.
again.
Thank you. Thank you.